Hello, everyone. Welcome to AAC&U's 2020 Institute on Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Campus Centers. We are so excited that you have selected to spend the week with us talking about the much needed work on racial healing in our communities. I am Tia McNair, the Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Student Success, and the Executive Director for the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Campus Centers at AAC&U. Many of you came to this institute or decided to participate for different reasons. Those reasons are motivating us to be engaged in the necessary work for our communities. For me, the reason for me participating is very personal. And for those of you, I imagine this the same. We are looking forward to engaging in conversation with you, in discussion, in reflection, and in growth. And then an opportunity for us to think about the action that we can lead within our communities. I am very pleased to have the opportunity to engage with our facilitators, our speakers, AAC&U leadership, and of course our TRHT mentors and our national evaluator in this work that is so very important to so many of us. I have the pleasure of first wanting to thank all of the people at AAC&U that have been engaged in our institute, from the staff and the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Student Success, to the IT office, to our communications office, and then definitely to our leader, Lynn Pasquerella, who you're going to hear from this afternoon. First, before we get started, I would like to introduce the mentors to you that are going to be working closely with you and our national evaluator. We're going to go through and they each are going to come up and welcome you to the Institute. First, we have Terry from Austin Community College.
Thank you, Tia, and I join Tia in welcoming all of you. My name is Terry Barksdale. I've served 10 years as a librarian at Austin Community College and am deeply moved by our work in this movement together for TRHT. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Next up is Anita from Millsaps College.
Hi, I'm Anita Durawa. I am a founding member of the TRHT Campus Center at Millsaps College, and I am a community liaison. I'm an English teacher, so that's what I do. That's what I love. And I love working with TRHT because it's all about narrative. It's all about the stories we tell about each other and the power that they have. So I'm thrilled to be here with you, looking forward to meeting lots of new people and seeing some old friends.
Thank you, Anita. Next up is Eric from UMBC.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eric Ford. I'm the director of the Choice Program at UMBC. We provide mentoring and advocacy for young people throughout the state. UMBC was also one of the first 10 campus centers. I'm excited to be here with everyone, to learn from everyone, and to provide mentoring and support to Georgia Highlands, Germanna Community College, as well as our neighbor, Towson University. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Jane?
Greetings, everyone. My name is Jane Ifekwinigwe. I'm proud to be representing Duke University, which was also one of the inaugural 10 campus centers for truth, racial healing, and transformation. And I'm excited about sharing the work that we've been doing and to learning about the work of others and to facilitating the involvement of other colleges and universities that are interested in becoming TRHT campus centers. And I think that this moment more than ever really shows us the power of the TRHT framework as a template, for individual, interpersonal, and systemic transformation. So welcome, and I look forward to working with all of you.
Aloha, everyone.
Yes, go ahead, Puni. Hey.
Sorry, I'm ready, Tia. Aloha, everyone from Hawaii. I got a lot of coffee in me. It's 8 a.m. here in Hawaii. Looking forward to working with all of you, even though we are an ocean and a continent away from each other, connected in so many ways, if nothing else, by this TRHT work. And in particular, I am looking forward to working with Cal State Fullerton, the Evergreen State College, UC Irvine, and University of Utah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Puni. Hey, Jermaine.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jermaine Pearson, and I serve as the Associate University Chaplain at Brown University. I'm so glad to be on this journey with you. We were one of the original members of the inaugural group, and we're so excited to share our journey and help you along your journey as well. I'm looking forward to working with my friends in the Northeast, Holy Cross, Adelphi, and my neighbors up north, Suffolk. I'm so excited to be here, and I look forward to working with all of you throughout the week.
Jay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jay Gooseby Smith, and I'm the director of the Citadel's Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Center. It has never been more important for us to do this work, and I look very forward to working with you, Agnes Scott, Otterbein, and Xavier.
Thank you. I didn't get this chance to say thank you to Jermaine too, so I want to make sure I do that. Thank you, Jay. Thank you. Thank you. Cynthia.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Cynthia Neal Spence, a professor of sociology at Spelman College and director of the Social Justice Program. And I am thrilled to be able to work with each and every one of you as we discuss the TRHT framework and actually apply it to this particular moment in history. I think that we can all become history makers as we interrogate what's going on with us today and forever. So thank you so much. I'm looking forward to mentoring my community college partners as well as Berea College as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Sharon.
Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Greetings from Newark, New Jersey, and a special shout out to my team from Brick City. It is my pleasure to join the TRHT family as well as our new cohorts coming in. I have the pleasure of mentoring Kentucky State University, University of Cincinnati, and Marywood University. It is an opportunity for us to share our stories, tell our truth, leading to healing, and then ultimately we all are looking for transformation. Welcome and enjoy.
Thank you, Sharon. Jane.
Hi, my name is Jane Turk. I am saying hello to you from St. Paul, Minnesota. I am honored and grateful to be part of this community and part of the inaugural 10 campus centers during my time at Hamline University. I'm now at Iowa and Minnesota Campus Compact. I'm really looking forward to working with Hope College, Andrews University, North Hennepin Community College, and University of Wisconsin Parkside. I'm excited to learn about you and learn with you and grow in community. So welcome everybody, so glad to be here.
Thank you, Jen. And last but not least is our national evaluator, Jessica Estevez.
¡Woo! Bienvenidos, buenas tardes a todos. I get the privilege of getting to work with all of our campuses, our founding campuses, and our new existing cohort in really building your capacity for equity and leadership through narrative change. And that's specifically through your evaluation. We at Estrategia are just really honored to walk alongside with you. So I'm looking forward to those wonderful ways in which we ask deep questions and learn to move this work forward. So un placer. Good to meet you all.
Thank you, Jessica. There are a number of people that are not on the opening session with us, but you'll have the opportunity to meet them. They're our experienced, our seasoned RX Racial Healing Circle facilitators, and then some of our advisory board members for the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation effort at AAC&U. And they too are looking forward to engaging with you throughout this week. Just a couple of announcements before I turn it over to our fearless leader, Lynn Pasquerella at AAC&U. Please make sure to check back on the Teams site on that platform on a regular basis, particularly in the general and the recordings and the material sessions. That's where we're actually going to be posting updates, notices, the recordings from the different workshops, from the facilitated discussions. So please make sure that you do that on a regular basis. And if you cannot or you have not been able to gain access, please let us know immediately so that we can get you onto the channel, because that will be our main point of contact with you throughout the Institute. All of the Zoom links that you will need, they're located on the TRHT program that is posted in the files on the general session. So that is how you will be able to get consultations, and you will have conversations with not only us individually through our consultations, but then an opportunity to work with each other. And you can use the Teams platform as a meeting space if you so choose, if you don't want to use a platform that your institution normally uses. At this time, for the rest of this plenary opening, I am going to turn it over to Lynn Pasquerella, the president of the Association of American Colleges and Universities. Lynn?
Thank you so much, Tia. It is such an honor and privilege to welcome everyone to AAC&U's TRHT Institute. I want to begin by expressing my gratitude to Vice President McNair and to her team in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Student Success for their extraordinary work in preparing for this institute, and to each of you for your deep and abiding commitment to furthering racial and social justice by turning words into action. AAC&U's Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Initiative is at the center of both our strategic plan and newly released vision for the future, what liberal education looks like. Founded on equity and inclusion and designed to guide higher education at this time of unparalleled transformation, it's a vision that details the ongoing dynamism and enduring relevance of liberal education in preparing students to address the most pressing ethical issues of the day, while positioning them for success in a future none of us can fully predict. It's a vision that takes direct aim at educational disparities and patterns of systemic disadvantage, especially those resulting from historical and contemporary effects of racism. And it's a vision that calls upon each institution of higher education to collectively reaffirm the role that a liberal education plays in discerning the truth, the ways in which it serves as a catalyst for interrogating the sources of narratives, including history, evidence, and facts, the ways in which a liberal education promotes an understanding that the world is a collection of interdependent yet inequitable systems, the ways in which it expands knowledge of human interactions, privilege, and stratification, and the ways in which higher education fosters equity and justice locally and globally. If nothing else, the current culture wars being played out on the national stage over how to respond to protesters calling for an end to anti-Black racism, whether to rename military bases bearing the names of leaders of the Confederacy, and whether to declare racism a public health crisis, demonstrate the inextricable link between a strong democracy and liberal education, an education which prepares students to be mindful of the dangers of ideological filtering, to speak across differences, to engage in ethical decision-making, deliberation with respect to competing arguments, and to exercise moral imagination while cultivating personal and social responsibility. At the inception of our work with TRHT campus centers, when we gathered for the first time on that sunny September day in DC, 3 weeks after hundreds of torch-bearing white supremacists descended on the campus of the University of Virginia at Charlottesville, I quoted James Baldwin's words of hope written to his nephew in a 1962 essay, From the Fire Next Time. Quote, "Everything now we must assume is in our hands. We have no right to assume otherwise. Do not falter in our duty now. We may be able, handful that we are, to end this racial nightmare and achieve our country and change the history of the world." Baldwin's words are more relevant in American life today than ever. This is a moment of extraordinary opportunity. We're witnessing real change, not as a result of leadership from the top, but from the people on the ground around the world taking action to end this racial nightmare. Virginia, Indiana, Florida, Tennessee are finally removing Confederate monuments. NASCAR has banned displays of the Confederate flag, and the football commissioner, who failed to support players who protested police violence, has apologized and publicly condemned the systemic oppression of Black people. The Navy and Marines have prohibited images of the Confederacy on military property. New York has passed legislation banning chokeholds, making face fake race-based 911 calls a crime, and implementing the automatic appointment of a special prosecutor to cases of police killing unarmed citizens. And Breonna's law regulating no-knock warrants has been introduced in Kentucky. Yet as I watched the videos of two white men in New Jersey, one of whom is a correctional officer, mocking George Floyd's killing by Minneapolis police and taunting Black Lives Matter protesters beside a truck with a sign, All Lives Matter, I thought of the expansiveness of the work that needs to be done. For 20 years, when I was a philosophy professor at the University of Rhode Island, I ran a prison project. My students served as liaisons between pretrial defendants and the public defender's office. They served as just discharge planners, probation and parole interns, tutors, and drug counselors. The project started in collaboration with the Department of Corrections and was designed to break down barriers and reform organizational and institutional cultures from within the system. One day, a student called me from Men's Maximum Security, where she had just witnessed a Black man on the ground, his face on the floor, handcuffed with shackles, being kicked in the head by correctional officers. She didn't know whether she should report what she saw or whether she should just leave, especially since we had recently discussed a case that had occurred 3 weeks earlier in which an officer who blew the whistle on two fellow officers for beating a man in intake so badly that he had to be hospitalized was the subsequent victim of repeated death threats and was forced to go on administrative leave after having the windows of his house blown out. I think about this case often when I'm confronting challenges on how to live a good life in the absence of a good society, because it illustrates that no matter how much support there is from the top for reform, and no matter how many rules, regulations, and laws are in place, the underlying unwritten cultures can upend the best efforts to promote change. In our society, the unwritten culture is built upon what philosopher Charles Mills refers to as a racial contract, reinforcing Toni Morrison's assertion that Americanness definitionally means whiteness. Mills contends that historical concepts of the social contract ignore the reality of an overriding racial contract based on a system of interlocking political, moral, economic, and epistemological principles that perpetuate a white supremacist ideology and consequently notions of a hierarchy of human value. Rewriting the dominant narrative and destabilizing the unwritten white supremacist culture requires an understanding of how we arrived at this moment. Nevertheless, to enact lasting change, we need what Greg Tate refers to as, quote, the cultural confidence to explore the ugly side of things. It will take courage, perseverance, indomitable spirit, and a reckoning with the ways in which our own institutions require radical reform. The urgency of this undertaking is highlighted by the Black in the Ivory Tower movement. Still, when I think of the remarkable faculty, staff, students, administrators, and community members with whom we are embarking on this shared endeavor, I am filled with nothing but optimism. One of the primary reasons for my confidence in the future is because of our next speaker, Dr. Gail Christopher, who's an award-winning social change agent and former senior advisor and vice president of the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. She is the visionary for and the architect of the WKKF-led Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation effort for America, and the inspiration behind AAC&U's TRHT initiative and our goal of establishing 150 centers across the country. Gail, welcome and thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Lynn. It is my honor and my privilege to be here with all of you today. I have to begin by just saying how much I appreciate you, your leadership. Tia McNair, you've just been amazing. And all the facilitators and campus leaders, I just cannot fully express my respect for and value for your work. We had no idea that this was an idea whose time had come quite so acutely as it has now. When we started this journey together, but we listened to our hearts and we had the courage to step into the space. And now we will, I think, be moving even faster, you know, toward the vision of an America that has truly jettisoned, actually completely gotten rid of permission to believe in and act upon the fallacy of white supremacy, the fallacy of a hierarchy of human value. So I'm excited more so today than I thought I could be, as I am seeing where our country is right now. Thank you very much for this institute and for being such a strategic and important ally and partner in this work.
Well, thank you. I'd like to take up from where you've left off, and so much has happened over the past 3 weeks, from major legislative changes to the elimination of racist corporate policies and practices such as Walmart, CVS, and other stores ending up the locking up of Black beauty products, to Twitter Square, Nike, and a flurry of other companies announcing that Juneteenth will be a paid holiday for their employees. What's the difference this time around, and how do we learn from failures of the past and creating momentum?
You know, I always say to people, there are some advantages to growing older. None of them are physical, right? And in this period of quarantine or you know, sheltering in place, I tell people my hair has been growing and graying on a daily basis. So I am reminded of this sense of hindsight, this sense of having lived through so much. I think what's different now is certainly the speed with which large numbers of people are engaged in a collective narrative, a collective understanding. I don't think there are more killings, that there are more incidents of brutality by police. We are just seeing them and we are documenting them. And the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, it kicked off in 2014. If you look back when Dr. King's, his last march that he led, and they held up signs, "I am a man," you know, it was the same message. The first article I ever published, the title was "That We Should Have Life." And so this notion of our lives matter, it's been a constant refrain, but we have had exposure to it at levels and at speeds, you know, that we've just never had before. I do think it's a confluence of many factors. I mean, the fact that we are all isolating, self-isolating because of COVID-19, I think there was a certain amount of energy that was built up or pent up that had to be expressed. And we also, in that moment of isolation, became more aware of our need to be connected. You know, a fundamental premise of the RX racial healing work is acknowledging that as human beings, we need to be connected. And so I think in this period of at least physical isolation, our innate need for connection, you know, has become more and more acute and more palpable. So when you combine the pent-up energy, the heightened, even subconscious need for connection with this exposure to such brutality and cruelty that so many people were able to see as a result of today's technology and the videos, it just created this perfect storm, if you will. What is different is the diversity and the scale. Never in the civil rights era did we have as many diverse people standing up and marching. This was not the case in any of the civil rights marches. And so this is unique, it's different. The other thing is we have had a revisiting, as you pointed out, of a permission to celebrate, if you will, this idea, this fallacy of white supremacy. It's coming from the highest places in the land with ambiguity and confusion and some sort of affirmation of that which is extreme and unacceptable. So, you know, I think it's combined to say to America, here's an opportunity to redefine yourself as a country and not be characterized by what you have seen, the atrocities that you have seen. I can't, as a person who was trained in the health and medical sciences and who practiced clinically for many, many years, I can't not mention the horror of the disproportionate numbers of people of color who are dying over 70%, I think 75 or 80% of the people who've died from COVID-19 in the District of Columbia have been African American. The Native American population has the highest incidence and death rate of COVID-19. The Latino community has a disproportionate diagnosis of this disease. So we are seeing the health consequences of racial hierarchy. We're seeing it, we haven't been able to grieve publicly because there's been this denial from the highest places in the land. And so you had this built up collective grieving of so much loss and so much death. All of these things have combined. I also think that we have a younger generation today that is more informed now than they might have been 25, 40 years ago in terms of numbers about and their understanding and grasps of policies. So it's just an amazing moment for, I think, what could be transformational and lasting change.
Thank you. AAC&U has a new publication, We Hold These Truths, Dismantling Racial Hierarchies, Building Equitable Communities, that's built around this work of TRHT. And in this publication, you offer compelling insights and guidance for doing the work ahead of us. I'd love to have you talk about the themes in that chapter.
You know, I have, that guidance is certainly built around the framework of TRHT. You know, the guidance is that we all must examine our institutional and our personal narratives. You know, we must expose ourselves to different perspectives and different points of view. We also, I think, have to be ready to apologize. We have to be ready to make amends, to redress and address the harm that we may have inadvertently been a part of. I think that is a very important part of the work, no matter what the institution. We have to realize, I loved when some of the Confederate monuments were coming down, one of the governors said it was wrong then and it's wrong now, right? It's not a political debate, it's a moral compass. It's understanding that devaluing human life is not acceptable if we are to be an interdependent community, a human family, and that's what we are. So that's an important part of the framework. The narrative change is not just telling a new story, it's also creating a new story that celebrates our interdependence and our interconnectedness. Again, COVID-19 has given us a clear picture. I wrote an article that was published by Crisis magazine of the NAACP just a couple of weeks ago. And I was asking, would COVID-19 help us move beyond denial of racial hierarchy, move us toward an awareness of our interdependence and our need for one another? And it has done that, right? When I can't buy meat at the grocery store because the people who pack the meat have a disproportionate incidence and exposure to this disease, I'm suddenly seeing in real time that we are in fact interconnected and interrelated. And so that's an important part of the principles of the work. The racial healing, the RX racial healing that I'll talk about more, is the other part of the framework. Marching is wonderful, and I am so proud of the people that are marching, but in the end, this work is relational work. This work is expanding our circles of compassion and engagement. And so the work you're doing on your campuses, and this is the difficult part, because relationships are built on feelings and emotions and perceptions. And so that's why the racial healing circles are so important. We also, in the article, talk about, you know, how the framework in terms of the separation, the law and the economy, the other three aspects of the five-part framework, how they might show up on the campus and how they might be put into action in terms of recognizing how the historic segregations and separations have isolated many of these campuses from the surrounding communities and have isolated the students from students who might be different from themselves. And there has to be an intentional strategy to overcome that separation and that isolation that is built into the structure of our society, particularly our institutions of higher education. Then we talk about the legal aspects and the things that we must perhaps revisit in terms of our charters and our values and our dynamics on the campus, our hiring practices, our policies. You know, I'm happy about all the corporations that are issuing statements and stepping up, but I sure wish they'd pay a living wage. You know, I mean, that would go a long way toward leveling the playing field. And so, you know, we have to have real meaningful policy and practice changes, which leads me to the final piece of that framework in that article, which is access and making the difficult decisions that universities may have to make, and some are already making them, to make sure that the tuition is affordable, that the loans that are taken out are not going to strap families and young people for their entire lives, you know, and this is policy at the federal level, you know, and as well as the state level. So helping to advocate for and restructure our nation's priorities in terms of investments that make education a priority. We can do something on our own campuses, but we also have to hold our elected officials and our institutional, you know, decision makers responsible for where are the tax dollars going. So I lay those things out, but I also try to invite folks to realize that the work that's happening on the campuses is also happening in so many other institutions right now. It's happening with the Academy of Pediatrics. They issued a powerful statement about how racism is a health problem. We have the American Library Association as a strategic partner. And most recently, I am so excited, Congress is getting into the act, and Congresswoman Barbara Lee has taken the courageous stand. We've worked with her over the last 3 years in a collective, collaborative effort to create a resolution based on the TRHT model, calling for a U.S. Commission on Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. She introduced that a couple of weeks ago. The next step will be moving toward actual legislation. And so we just have to continue to build the critical mass bipartisan support for that effort, because that could be, you know, taking this work to scale and making it a permanent part of America's journey.
That would be wonderful. Calls for racial justice and an end to anti-Black racism in particular are inextricably linked to discussions of policing Black bodies. What do you hope will emerge from this moment of trauma, which is one slice of time in over 4 centuries of pain?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. And it's come to me from a few reporters recently. I have to be honest, I know my tolerance for trauma, and I have not been able to look at that horrific video. I have too many images that I hold in the back of my mind and my heart of actual people that I've known who've been brutalized and suffered and died. And so this is a moment of trauma, and people need to realize that it is reigniting memories of trauma for many, many people. I hope that we will collectively, as we are doing, you know, that we will stand up and say no, that this is not allowed. We cannot allow, for instance, the Senate bill that's been introduced that does not ban chokeholds. That's just not enough. You know, that brutal, dehumanizing process, if you will, has to be banned. Many other forms of brutality and denigration and devaluation of the Black body, of the human body, all of these things have to come about. But you know, on a deep psychological level, this is why the racial healing work is so important. I can only hurt you because deep inside, not only do I devalue you, I devalue me. This work, because we're either extending our capacity for love and caring, or we are in fact projecting our own self-hatred onto others. And so this work of bringing people together into an environment that is affirming and stimulates a sense of belonging and affirmation and appreciation and consciousness change, which is what the racial healing circles do, it spreads the energy of healing and acceptance and affirmation that has to become the norm. All these calls for defunding the police, I wish we had a better phrase, but we do have to divest and reinvest in infrastructure in our communities that creates communities that assure caring and compassion and support. We can't let our jails continue to be the substitute for mental health care, right? Which is what they are. We can't continue to turn a blind eye to the very real aspects of trauma that lead to emotional needs that are going unmet. So I'm hoping that it's not just a transformation in police behavior. I'm hoping it leads to a transformation in what we value as a society, not just who we value, but what we value in terms of our ability to create institutions of caring and support. If we can come up with $2 trillion or more in an emergency, we can make sure that everyone has a livable income in America. That is doable. And so I'm hoping that we will move toward real transformation as a result of this shocking moment where everything has been turned upside down, our hearts have been opened, and hopefully we've got our heads on straight and we can design a new way forward for America.
Well, partisan divides in the US are greater than they have been in more than half a century. And we saw with the debates around reopening the states, as soon as the evidence became clear of the disparate impact of this virus on communities of color, in particular African-American communities, there were protesters on the steps of the state houses calling for reopening. How do we encourage people to listen critically, to engage in that humanistic identification when they're so far apart and the focus is on their own self-interest?
Well, and it's all about the narrative again, you know, in the sense that, and someone has the bully pulpit in our country who, and, you know, unfortunately the media allows him to manipulate that pulpit to express views that fly in the face of science and evidence and health, public health. But this is why this work, and I hope that the campuses will be able to take the work into their communities and bring diverse people together. That's one of the principles of the work. You know, it's not talking to the choir. It's talking to and bringing together and engaging diverse people, because it is the important component of building a future together. So I think that the how, and it's a very important question, Lynn, the how is really through the engagement. It's through it's through the circles. It's through, and we have to do it virtually now that we're in quarantine, but it is, and you're going to experience our try at that this afternoon, but we really do have to engage and we have to listen. And I think that, you know, if you had a continuum, there are people on either extreme. Our work is to expand the middle and make that middle the majority, so that the extremes will always be there. Hopefully they will not always be in the White House, but we have to expand the middle of reason and the capacity for emotional intelligence and compassion. And that is definitely being engaged with people who are different from ourselves. So I really do believe we have to do this work. And I think from all the people that are in the streets marching and all the people that are expressing themselves on social media, I think that expanding middle is getting bigger and bigger. I am very hopeful.
Mm-hmm. Talk from your perspective of expertise on why racism is a public health issue in our country.
You know, and I've been saying this for so many decades that's why the methodology, I use the term RX as in prescription, right? Because we are innately designed to self-heal, to self-regenerate, to be healthy bodies. That is, we have absolutely amazing capacities for restoration and for health. But every time we are in a state of fear and stress and anxiety, our restorative, our rebuilding and replenishing, our innate capacities, they have to take a back seat to our defense, you know? And one of the reasons that, you know, there's so much increased vulnerability among communities of color right now is because bodies have been assaulted in so many ways for so long. You know, every experience of being devalued, every reminder of the hierarchy and that we're not at the top, we're somewhere at the bottom, it takes a toll on us in a biological, physiological sense. And it diminishes our capacity for resilience and the innate restorative capacities that we have. So when a major assault like COVID-19 comes along, you know, we're knocked out because we've spent our whole lives dealing with the daily assaults of being part of a society that believes in the hierarchy of human value. So it gets internalized, it gets under the skin, and that is why the work of social determinants of health, the work of creating a society that is really about health and not pathology, you know, that racism has to be at the center of that. Originally, the social determinants of health framework in this country was not explicit about racism. Kamara Jones at the CDC, who was at the CDC, who's now at Morehouse, has worked for decades to try to move our country to be willing to be explicit about racism. We're finally being explicit in that sense, but it is a determinant of well-being, and we have to know that and build up our capacities for resilience. And that's a totally different program I've developed, but our capacities for resilience are very much grounded in the quality of relationships that we can create within our circles, our inner circles, our next expansive circles. So people who are in leadership positions on campuses, you know, I think have to be intentional about creating communities that demonstrate care and value for every single person. And it is through daily interactions, it's through affirmation, it's through the images that are on the campus, it's through what's in the textbooks, you know, it's through the opportunities for self-expression and creativity. There are just all kinds of ways. But I think knowing that we're doing this as part of our work to counter the historic and contemporary fallacy of racial hierarchy, and engaging the students and their creative abilities in that work intentionally. I think that's how we're going to get there. You know, there's an African proverb that says, to stumble is not to fall, but to move forward faster. I think we're in a moment of moving forward faster together. And I really do believe that, you know, we're going to usher in a transformed America.
Thank you. Now, Sia Sheldon makes some similar points in her work on bandwidth recovery, where she talks about the stresses of being food insecure, shelter insecure, but also the impact of racism on a person's ability to learn, not just, you know, Claude Steele's notion of stereotype threats, but you cannot focus on the learning that needs to take place if you are the constant victim of or subject of racism. So how should college and university leaders in the classroom and the administration as peers be mindful of this, and what should we be doing?
You know, I do appreciate that question. I, for one, think that stress is about a demand for energy production, right? And energy utilization. We tend to underestimate how absolutely central the role of nutrition and access to healthy, vibrant food that is nourishing, that is hydrating, that is replenishing of those systems that are critically important, both in learning and in adapting, right? So I think the campuses need to be very, very thoughtful about not only the quality of the food that's available on the campus, but what are the relationships with access to quality food in the communities that surround the campus, and what are the policies and practices we need. You know, if we can, I heard an interview this morning, she said, if we can have a fire hydrant on every corner in a city, we can have the availability of quality fresh produce and food and quality meats that are, you know, good for you. So I think the issue of nutrition is absolutely critical, and we don't pay enough attention to it in terms of quality nutrition in any of our institutions, particularly in our institutions where the most vulnerable are housed, like the foster care, juvenile justice, and those other systems. And we need to find this into the core of the curriculum so that as we're preparing the leaders of tomorrow, they understand that as leaders, they have to have a holistic perspective. We also have to be intentional about not just the diversity of our campus, but the opportunity for interaction of those diverse groups. You know, we do tend to sort of self-isolate, you know, into our own group. So those of us who are in a position to do administration, we have to create opportunities to bring diverse people together in ways that are affirming, that acknowledge a sense and the need for belonging and a need for affirmation, right? And so, you know, it's not, let's not y'all come to a conversation about race. No, that's not what we're saying. You know, let's create smaller interactive opportunities for engagement and do so in ways that facilitate and affirm everyone that's involved. But also, and from that, you build the connective tissue that you need to do the hard discussions, right? But you need to build the connective tissue first, the trust, the value, so that you can move into the more challenging and perplexing discussions. So those are some of the aspects. I think it has to be a holistic approach. You know, my Center for Healing in Nature, nature is a natural provides an opportunity, a space for healing and connection that, you know, the science is there, we don't lift it up enough, but our time within and exposed to natural settings can go so far to reduce our cortisol and our stress levels and increase our innate resilience and capacity for adapting. So many campuses are beautiful. They have gardens beyond belief, you know. Make sure that the students understand that time in those gardens, time with that nature, is time that is important for their own healing and their own resilience.
Well, we're not very good role models of that in the academy, that's for sure. And part of the conversation in Black in the Ivory Tower was the ways in which professors of color experience microaggressions all the time in terms of being asked to mentor students. Not that they aren't happy to be mentors, but that the work goes unrecognized, that when we look at tenure and promotion, it's peer-reviewed journal articles and how many grants you can get, not how you are changing the lives of individual students or making college and university education visible by ensuring that your institution is an anchor institution grounded in the notion that your success is dependent upon the success and well-being of those in the communities in which you're located and those you seek to serve. So how can we address those both hidden and overt biases in the academy?
Well, that is a huge question. And I will offer some thoughts. I'm going to share a little bias here. And I, for one, because of my basic, you know, holistic physiological perspective, I'm not real comfortable with the term microaggressions. I feel like it minimizes the impact. And particularly when the impact is cumulative, right? You know, so it might seem like a small thing, but if it's on top of a lifetime of repeated small assaults, I don't know that micro is the best description of what people of color have experienced over time. So I just want to put that out there. I appreciate it though, because by introducing the term, we have brought people's attention to the power of daily interactions to have a negative effect, you know, or a positive. So that's good, but I'm just saying, let's not minimize the costs that we have personally, as your question reflects. I think creating a culture that is acknowledging that we are on a collective journey together. That is the leadership responsibility to say that, look, nobody's gotten this right. You know, we are on this journey together. And once you sort of create that fresh air, that opportunity to say, you know, we realize the history of our institution, we realize the microaggressions that happen, but we're trying to do better. Then I think you engage people and they're more willing to pinpoint, if you will, the experiences and the opportunities. Because most of the times that we are victims or we are perpetrating these aggressions, quite often we have no idea. And so we have to create a culture. I'll tell a quick story if I have time. I made a speech many, many years ago when I developed a multicultural education program that told the history of diverse groups that peopled the United States. And we had a really robust section on Indigenous and Native American people. And somewhere in my remark, I made some statement at the end of my little talk about, you know, I take responsibility, and I said the buck stops here. And, you know, I had heard that expression growing up, most of us have. And then this elderly Native American leader came up to me afterwards, and he looked me in the eye and he said, I never thought I would hear something like that from your mouth. I am so disappointed. And I was like, what have I done? First of all, I apologize for the offense, which is a requirement when you have offended, but I had no clue, right? And he said, do you know where that expression, the buck stops here, do you know where it came from? And I said, no, I thought it came from one of the presidents, you know, of the United States. And he said, no, it was from a period in history when Native Americans were forced to run a gauntlet, and the soldiers were lined up on each side, and they would beat the Native American, and at the last person would kill him. And so when it said the buck stopped here, it meant this is where the murder, the ending would happen. I was absolutely floored. I had no idea that this was part of the history. I share that story because I think it's important that we all do this work from a place of humility and realize that because the way our society has been structured and the way we've been isolated and separated, and our continued ignorance about the multiple histories, that we are always going to make mistakes. But if we can create a culture that is engaging and that is compassionate, we will accelerate, I believe, our ability to express, to say, you know, those professors could say, look, I can't do that. You know, I don't want to mentor because I'm trying to meet this deadline. Asking me to do that is an imposition. You know, you create a culture that allows for the expression that is not threatening. I think I would summarize by saying, and this is in my forthcoming book that I'm very excited to be publishing with you all, people don't realize that even the policing system was based on this premise that the existence of these Indigenous and Black people was viewed as a threat to the dominant group. And so as police are trained, you know, the language that they use is eliminate the threat often, right? And so this notion that one group's existence is a threat to the other, you know, it's built into the hierarchy, it's built into the structure, and it's operating on a subconscious level. Sometimes it's conscious in terms of the extremists but this notion that a person's presence is a threat or a group's presence is a threat, that's underneath all of this hatred and this extremism, and that's what we have to be willing. We have to be willing to address and replace it with this understanding that we are a sacred, interconnected, interdependent human family.
Yes, I mean, even what might seem innocuous can have long-term, profound health impacts. And I host this radio program called the Academic Minute, which is, of course, 90 seconds because it's an academic minute. but one of the researchers presented on the fact that being exposed to racist activities on a daily basis actually can change the cell structures and has deleterious effects. But one of our audience members is wondering whether there's anything biological that would lead to African American communities, Latinx communities, Native American communities experiencing greater effects from COVID-19, or are these the structures of racism that are leading to this?
I think the term biological runs the risk of making it seem like it might be genetic or innate. I would say it's the physiological and to some degrees biological and biochemical adaptations to a lifetime of exposure to demands, if you will, demands for adaptation, and it varies, and I'm always astounded by the literature that women who are more highly educated and have higher incomes, women of color, face a greater risk of a problematic birth outcome, and it's because the higher up you move into the system, be you a lawyer, an academic, or a doctor, the more acutely exposed you are to the racism because of the structures, of hierarchy. And so we have to be careful that we don't make it, as Ibram Kendi said so beautifully in his article, I think it was in the Atlantic, where he said, stop blaming the victims, right? Mm-hmm. Somewhere in between the blaming of the victim and the dismissing of the disparities is this place of understanding that what we are dealing with is the effect, the cumulative effect, the deleterious effect of the demands for adaptation and the absence of the capacity over time to meet those demands. The field of epigenetics is showing us just how the predisposition to a certain set of responses, be it metabolic syndrome or diabetes or cardiac pathologies, these things are affected by our long-term exposure to stress, also our long-term opportunities to get those things in at a nutritional and biochemical level that help to suppress, if you will, the negative expression of the gene. So there is nothing innately biological, I think, about people of color that makes them more vulnerable. I think there is a need for addressing the demands for energy, minimizing that, and making sure that the capacity is there through multiple avenues to assure that the adaptation, inherent capacity is there. Even social engagement is healing. Time in nature is healing. Adequate and optimal nutrition is healing. Being valued as a human being has a healing effect. And so we can reduce the risk factor for the experience of COVID-19 if we work at it, if we help one another. And I can't underestimate the reality of health, lack of access to quality healthcare, and poor and discriminatory treatment within the healthcare system. I mean, that is very real. And, I think we have to build in systems in the medical system where we can check each other's biases and monitor, because, when you're under the stress of having to make a life and death decision as a medical practitioner, that's when you're more likely to express your bias, right? And so we have to build in small group and partnership systems and evaluation and assessment systems that allow us to minimize the risk of that kind of exposure to bias once you get to treatment. But, it's a continuum, and we have to work at all levels of the continuum. As an African-American woman, a holistic health practitioner, I really do believe that we have to do everything we can to also protect and defend ourselves. One writer said something like that. It didn't come across as he intended it, right? But Van Jones, I believe, wrote this article, or it was on one of the social media, and it talked about Black people needing to exercise and, get proper diet and blah, blah, blah. And boy, did he receive a firestorm of criticism. It fell into the Ibram Kendi category of blaming the victim. And I think somewhere away between the blaming the victim and the giving up has to be the determination to stand together and to overcome the vicissitudes and the vulnerabilities that we have a disproportionate exposure to.
Mm. Well, thank you so much for offering your insights. We're truly grateful for all that you're doing in leading all of us to a society that truly does jettison a belief in a hierarchy of human value. We thank you for your courage, for your innovation, and for your leadership. A reminder to the participants, you now have a 15-minute break, and we will convene for the RX Racial Healing Circles at 3:15. Thanks to all the faculty and to everyone involved. We're looking forward to the next few days and truly grateful to be embarking on this journey with you. So take care, and we'll see you in 15 minutes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.